scale of 1 to 10, how pretty do I look today?
You look scary.
Why?
I just feel scared.
Wait, why are you scared?
You just look weird.
Why do I look weird?
At first glance, everything about Ben and Evelyn looked completely normal, almost like any other young couple sharing their lives online. Their videos felt casual, sometimes awkward in a relatable way, sometimes playful. And to most viewers, nothing stood out as alarming. People saw a successful young entrepreneur paired with a popular content creator, and it fit the kind of story the internet loves to believe in. But that illusion didn't just fade, it shattered. News suddenly broke that Ben had been arrested in New York over serious allegations involving physical harm, and the tone around him shifted instantly. What once looked like harmless clips and everyday interactions started to feel different, almost uncomfortable in hindsight. The same content that built their image was now being re-examined under a completely different lens. And as people began connecting the dots, it became clear that this situation wasn't something that appeared out of nowhere. It felt like something had been building beneath the surface for a long time, something most people either didn't notice or chose not to question. As more details came out, the situation became impossible to ignore. The charges weren't vague or minor. They were specific, serious, and deeply unsettling. Ben was accused of physically harming another individual, with claims that included violent behavior that went far beyond what anyone expected from his public persona. Despite his legal team stepping in and his immediate denial of the accusations, the damage to his image had already begun. What made this situation even more intense was how quickly Evelyn's name became part of the conversation. Because of their relationship, people started wondering how much she knew, what she experienced, and whether any of this connected back to their time together. It wasn't just about the legal case anymore. It became personal, emotional, and much bigger in the eyes of the public. And as the internet does, it didn't stay focused on the present for long. Instead, it started digging, searching for anything that might explain how things got to this point. And what people started finding would only make the situation more disturbing. Once the investigation moved into the past, everything began to shift. Old videos and photos resurfaced, the kind that had been overlooked or dismissed before. At the time, they seemed like nothing, just everyday content, quick moments captured without much thought. But now, those same clips carried a completely different weight. Viewers noticed small but unsettling details, including visible marks on Evelyn's face that raised immediate concern. Back then, those details may have been brushed off or ignored, but now they were being analyzed closely, frame by frame. People began questioning whether those signs were accidental or something more serious. It created a wave of speculation, with audiences trying to piece together a timeline that suddenly felt much darker than anyone had assumed. What made it even more unsettling was how easily these details had been missed in real time. It wasn't that the signs weren't there, it was that no one had connected them. And just when it seemed like the situation couldn't get more uncomfortable, even more disturbing clips began to resurface. What truly shifted public perception were the clips that had once been dismissed as humor. In multiple videos, Ben made comments that, at the time, might have been labeled as awkward or edgy jokes. But looking back, they didn't feel like jokes at all. They felt specific, repeated, and strangely focused on harmful scenarios. One of the most unsettling patterns involved him describing situations where Evelyn could be physically hurt, including moments where he casually talked about holding her underwater. These weren't one-off comments. They came up more than once, which made them harder to ignore. Even more telling was Evelyn's reaction in those moments. She didn't laugh in a way that felt natural. Instead, she often looked confused, uncomfortable, or unsure of how to respond. That contrast made the situation even more chilling, because it suggested that something about those jokes wasn't landing the way they were intended. And once viewers started noticing that pattern, it became impossible to unsee. What once passed as humor now looked like something much more serious, raising a question that lingered throughout the entire situation. Why weren't these moments taken seriously from the start? The most frustrating part of the situation for many people was realizing that some of these warning signs had already been pointed out before everything escalated. There were viewers who had noticed the strange behavior, the uncomfortable interactions, and the tone of those so-called jokes. Some even spoke up, raising concerns and questioning whether everything was truly okay behind the scenes. But instead of those concerns gaining traction, they were often dismissed or overshadowed. Evelyn, from what people observed publicly, seemed to defend the relationship or downplay those moments, which made it harder for others to push the conversation further. This created a dynamic that's surprisingly common, where outside voices see potential issues, but the person closest to the situation either doesn't see it the same way or isn't ready to acknowledge it. Whether it was emotional attachment, trust, or simply not wanting to believe something was wrong, the result was the same. The signs stayed in the background, never fully addressed. And by the time everything came to light, people were left wondering how things might have been different if those early concerns had been taken more seriously. When Evelyn finally addressed the situation publicly, it didn't come with dramatic accusations or detailed explanations. Instead, it came with something quieter, but just as powerful. She confirmed that the relationship had ended, and she spoke about boundaries being crossed and the need to prioritize her safety and well-being. The wording was careful, but the message was clear. There was something serious behind that decision. What made her statement even more impactful was how it connected to things she had said in the past. Moments where she mentioned struggling personally, feeling overwhelmed, or not being able to take care of herself properly suddenly carried a different meaning. Those weren't just vague life updates anymore. They felt like glimpses into what she may have been dealing with internally. And for many viewers, that realization was difficult to process. It highlighted how easy it is for someone to go through something intense while still appearing functional on the surface. Her decision to step away didn't just mark the end of a relationship. It hinted at everything that may have led up to it. Just as people were trying to process everything related to the relationship, another layer of controversy began to surface, this time involving financial allegations. Reports started circulating about a legal case connected to cryptocurrency activity, with claims that investors had been misled through a pattern of hype followed by rapid decline. While this situation was separate from the personal allegations, it added a new dimension to how people viewed Ben as a whole. It suggested a possible pattern of behavior that extended beyond personal relationships and into professional decisions. For many, this wasn't just about one incident anymore. It became about consistency, whether there were repeated instances where actions led to serious consequences for others. That shift made the story even more complex because it blurred the line between different aspects of his life. Instead of isolated situations, everything began to feel interconnected. And that raised a bigger question that went beyond just this case. How often do people overlook patterns when they appear in different forms? After all the clips, the statements, and the allegations, one question continues to linger. How many warning signs do people actually notice in real time? And how many do they ignore until everything becomes undeniable? Situations like this force people to reflect, not just on what happened, but on how it was perceived along the way. It's easy to recognize patterns when looking back, when every piece of information is already on the table. But in the moment, things are rarely that clear. Emotions, assumptions, and trust can blur the reality of what's happening. And when public figures are involved, that complexity becomes even stronger because everything is filtered through content, edits, and curated moments. What makes this story resonate isn't just the details. It's the realization that the signs may have been there all along. The difference is that now everyone is looking at them with a completely different understanding.